Indian Nakota Nation have in fact already been put forward by the Indian Resource Council as part of the consultation process. Our proposed amendments to Section 4.2, subparagraph 2, concerning that the minister's ongoing fiduciary obligations, the right to cancel a lease in default contains subsection 4.2, and our proposed amendments to the limitations of action set out in Section 5.1. All of these were included in the recommendations made by Indian Resource Council many months ago. We are simply reiterating the position of Indian Resource Council. So we can see our amendments should be the concluding part of a consultation process, not the beginning of a new process. I am sure that representatives of the Indian Resource Council, as well as First Nations in general, would agree to that no new consultation is required for any of the amendments that we have put forward. As was correctly pointed out at this committee's hearing last week, the House of Commons has already made amendments to the Bill C-5 that do not require another round of consultation with First Nations. The Parliamentary Secretary told this committee that there is no need for further consultations when, I quote, the obligation is not on us as opposed to the First Nations. None of our proposed amendments create obligations on the First Nations according to the Parliamentary Secretary's own criteria. Then there is no need to consult on the amendments that the Stoney and Nakota Nations are proposing. I would now like to say a few words about Canada's fiduciary obligations to us in regards to our oil and gas resource. The Minister has said that there is no need to expressly reiterate this fiduciary obligations in Bill C-5 because it's already obvious that these obligations will continue. Unfortunately, when the Minister's lawyers get to court, they often argue that the Minister has no fiduciary obligations whatsoever. The Supreme Court of Canada, in its February 13th Emerson decision, had this to say, I quote, I believe that the Crown's fiduciary obligation to the bands with respect to the granting of rights to others to exploit the mineral resources of the bands and the way in which the royalties received were handled take hold by reasons of the surrenders in 1946. The Stoney and Nakota Nations have surrendered our mineral rights to the Crown in the same way as the Emerson, the Sampson bands surrendered theirs. We too are entitled to expect that the Crown's legislations continue to reflect these fiduciary obligations. Unfortunately for us, the Supreme Court also ruled that these fiduciary obligations arising from the mineral surrender are not protected by Section 35 of the Constitution Act. Therefore, when the Minister spoke last week about this constitutional obligation and the existing non-derogation clause in the Indian Oil and Gas Act, there is certainly some doubt that uncertainty as to the extent that these protections exist in light of the recent ruling of the Supreme Court. During the debate on Bill C-5, it has been suggested that if we don't like Bill C-5, there is no other options available to us. Chief Bearspaw would like to speak to exactly what other oil and gas management options are available to us. Thank you. Yes. Chief David Bearspaw.
Yes, ABOR nangaha amane to wakane yes ni ABOR nga finding amne tarapada yes kabine kinchani ginchia bicha dagu tasamya gi chia bitcha gidam singtown cha hongya bicha haini hibicha nangaha amane nwashi jubine Ompian in Chavichian in Chingabichal, in Hibichahuan. Toada Dauskaminane, Gita Dauskabin, one Changi Chamichal, in Hibichahuan, Kazangabicha, Hoyabishinchian, Toada Gahangeja Yabichin, Ye, Toada Ngijayamik, one Ingichin Bichal, Neni hani hidno amba nangahamba ni shniesichiam. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Senators, ladies and gentlemen. I'd just like to say a few comments. First of all, it's an honor to be here today speaking in front of you. Contrary to what the bill's explanatory note suggests, Bill C-5 does not provide for increased participation by First Nations in the exploitation of our own oil and gas resources. In fact, Section 16 prevents us from exploiting our own oil and gas resources, and Section 4.3 provides that Bill C-5 regulation overrides our own Stoney and Nakota bylaws. I challenge the minister to show me where the bill allows us to have more say in how our oil and gas is produced. We don't see much of a hand up in the present wording of Bill C-5. Given this absence of participation, some of you have asked, why don't the Stoney Nation opt into the oil and gas management portions of the First Nations Oil and Gas Management Act? Legislation commonly known as FNOGMA. FNOGMA is an optional piece of legislation that was passed in 2005, and that was designed to allow First Nations to have greater control over their oil and gas resources. The short answer is that I and my fellow chiefs are in fact investigating this option. We would like to take greater control of our oil and gas assets and our royalty monies. Unfortunately, our analysis of FNOGMA has unveiled a couple of major stumbling blocks to our assuming management of our oil and gas resources. There are two fundamental problems with FNOGMA. Firstly, FNOGMA does not transfer actual legal ownership of our oil and gas to us. Section 3 of the Act clearly states that the title on reserve oil and gas stays with Her Majesty. If Bill C-5 were accompanied by amendments to FNOGMA that permitted real ownership of our oil and gas, this option to Canada's existing control of our resources under the Indian Oil and Gas Act would be much attractive to us. Second, the second major problem with FNOGMA is that it allows Canada the right to tax and even expropriate our oil and gas resources. Nothing in FNOGMA prevents this. Why would we sacrifice the current protection of our Aboriginal rights as enshrined in Section 87 of the Indian Act and expose our resources to taxation by opting into FNOGMA? The membership vote that is required under FNOGMA will have little chance of passing unless our membership assured that our resource royalties will not be taxed by Canada or the provinces. So FNOGMA would be a real option to us if that act were amended to transfer legal title to First Nations, and if Canada removed from the statute the ability to tax our oil and gas resources. You will note that a number of other Alberta First Nations are in support of our position. It is no coincidence that the major oil and gas producing First Nations are supporting the Stoney Nakota position in regard to Bill C-5. Bill C-5 may provide benefits to those First Nations that have yet to see revenues from oil and gas production. But for those of us with existing oil and gas royalty income, Bill C-5, like FNOGMA, opens the door for Canada to tax our resources, something that is presently not possible under the Indian Act, nor under the present Indian oil and gas regulations. On behalf of my fellow chiefs and I would like to reiterate our appreciation for you inviting us here today. We have provided each of you with our 4 amendments to Bill C-5 that we would ask you to consider. Should you wish, our legal counsel, Mr. Ray, can elaborate on these amendments for you. And further to that, I'd just like to add a few other